If you've ever felt like your prayers just hit the ceiling and fall back down, if you've ever wondered why it feels like God's not even listening, why it's so quiet when you're pouring your heart out to Him, it's not because He's ignoring you. It's because you were never taught the real way Jesus prayed. The church didn't just get prayer wrong. They totally flipped it around, turned it upside down. The way Jesus prayed was so revolutionary, so much of a threat to their power over people, that if you really understood it, you wouldn't need their buildings, their rituals, or their permission ever again. And that's precisely why they kept it hidden. Hang in there with me. In the next little while, you won't just learn about prayer. You're going to be let in on a secret, a way of praying that will change you from feeling like a beggar at heaven's door to realizing you're the very answer you've been looking for. But I have to warn you, this isn't your typical Sunday school lesson. What you're about to discover will completely change everything you thought you knew about talking to God. There are 7 big revelations coming up. First, why your prayers don't seem to work the way you were told they would, and the lie that keeps you from having any real power in prayer. Second, the secret place Jesus talked about, and it's not where you think it is. Third, why Jesus prayed before He performed miracles, not after. Fourth, the one thing Jesus did that hardly anyone talks about today. Fifth, what it truly means to become the prayer. Sixth, why this teaching was considered so dangerous that it had to be suppressed. And seventh, the key that will change how you connect with God forever. But first, why does prayer so often feel like you're just yelling into a void? You know the feeling, that desperate prayer in the middle of the night when everything's falling apart. The deals you try to make with God when you get bad news. The constant repetition of words that seem to vanish into thin air. You've been there. We all have. Kneeling next to a hospital bed, whispering please until your throat's raw. Standing in an empty house after someone's left, begging God to bring them back. Lying awake at 3 a.m., trying to remember every Bible verse you've ever heard, hoping one of them will finally open up heaven's door. You were told to say the right things, to beg in just the right way, to try to earn God's favor by behaving a certain way, to rattle off your Hail Marys, recite your Psalms, speak in tongues, claim your promises, and yet, even though you were sincere, even though you cried, even though you followed all the religious rules, you felt like you weren't being heard, like you were invisible, like you'd been abandoned. But Jesus knew this was coming 2,000 years ago. He said, don't just babble on and on like people who don't know God, because they think God will hear them if they just say enough words. Just babbling, that's what most churches base their idea of prayer on. Think about that. Jesus specifically warned against that kind of repetitive, wordy prayer that you hear in most churches today. He called it empty, powerless, the way of people who didn't understand the real nature of connecting with God. Here's the first big secret they never told you. Prayer isn't about repeating things. Prayer isn't about asking for things. Prayer isn't about putting on a show for a God who's not really there and needs to be convinced to love you. Prayer is a state of being. Right now, before we go any further, I want you to do something. Think back to a specific time when you prayed with all your heart and felt nothing but silence. Don't just think about it, feel it again. The desperation, the emptiness you felt afterward, the feeling of wondering if God even existed. Hold on to that memory. Don't try to ignore it. By the time we're done here, you'll see that moment in a completely different light. You'll realize that what felt like being abandoned was actually an invitation. Because if prayer isn't about repeating things, if it isn't about begging for things, if it isn't the religious performance they taught us, then what was Jesus really talking about? Jesus said something that would make most pastors very uncomfortable, something so radical that if their congregations truly understood it, the whole religious system would collapse overnight. When you pray, go into your inner room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Your inner room, not your bedroom closet, not your church pew, not some physical place where you can hide from the world. The inner room of your being, the secret place in your mind where no religious show can reach, where no teaching can get in, where no pastor or priest can stand between you and God. In Solomon's temple, there was a sacred space called the Holy of Holies. Once a year on the Day of Atonement, only the high priest could go into this inner room to connect directly with God. It was the most sacred place on earth, separated from the outer areas where everyone else gathered by a thick curtain. But when Jesus died, something incredible happened. The curtain was torn in two from top to bottom. Not from bottom to top, like someone had ripped it, but from top to bottom, as if God himself had torn down the barrier. Jesus didn't just give you access to the Holy of Holies. He showed you that this sacred space, this direct way to connect with God, is inside you. It always has been. It always will be. The great cosmic joke. You are looking outside yourself for a God who lives inside you. You are searching in temples made by people for something that was already built into the very core of your being. The secret place isn't secret because it's hidden from you. It's secret because it's hidden as you. It's the deepest truth about who you are, underneath all the noise, all the programming, all the religious training. Close your eyes right now. I'm serious. If you're driving, save this and come back to it later. But if you can, close your eyes. Now imagine closing a door. Not a real door, but the door of your awareness. Shut out all the noise, all the shoulds, all the musts, all the religious rules. Shut out the voices telling you you're not good enough, not holy enough, not faithful enough. What's left when you shut out everything that isn't you? Feel that stillness. That's not emptiness. That's not loneliness. That's the secret place Jesus was talking about. That's the inner room where the Father waits. Not as some far-off God, but as the deepest truth of who you are. If you've always felt like you don't fit in with the religious crowd, if their worship feels empty and their prayers feel meaningless, it's because you were never meant for their noise. You are called to this inner sanctuary. You were made for this sacred quiet. But here's the strange thing. Why did Jesus focus on silence? Why not passionate pleas? Why not the impressive prayers that make people in church think you're so spiritual? Why not the spiritual performances that make others think you're holy? Because silence wasn't the end of his secret. It was the doorway to something even more radical. Here's what the Gospels show that most people completely miss. Jesus had a pattern. Before every major miracle, before every show of God's power, before every time when heaven touched earth, there was prayer. But look closer. Read between the lines. What was he actually doing in those moments? The Father knows what you need before you ask him. Stop. Think about that for a minute. If the Father already knows your needs, every single one of them, before you even say the words, then what was Jesus' prayer really doing? Transferring information? No. Persuading God? Absolutely not. Begging? Never. Jesus was doing something the religious world has completely lost sight of. Alignment. Put your hand on your heart right now. Feel the rhythm that was given to you before you ever spoke a word, before you ever formed a prayer. That rhythm, that steady, faithful beating, that is prayer. That is God expressing himself through your physical body, keeping you alive, sustaining you every moment without you having to ask. Your heartbeat is God's prayer for you. Your breath is the Holy Spirit flowing through you. Your very existence is the Father saying yes to you every moment of every day. But Jesus took it even further. He didn't just align himself with what the Father was doing. He became what the Father was doing. And that's when the religious establishment got worried. What if I told you that Jesus never actually wanted your prayers at all? He wanted something far more dangerous to religion, something that would make you completely independent of their systems. He wanted you to become the prayer. Before we unlock the next chamber, I need to talk to those of you who feel this awakening burning inside you. Like this video as a signal fire. It's not just a button to push. It's a way of spreading the flame, a way of letting others know that the light still burns and they're not alone. Subscribe as a vow of remembrance. Every new person who joined this path tells the algorithms that this truth must not be buried, that it must be shown to those who are still searching in the dark. And when you do, declare it in the comments with the words, "I am awakening." This isn't just text. It's a signal to connect with others who are on the same wavelength as you and are also awakening. Share this video as an offering. Every time you do, seeds are planted in the hearts of those who are waiting for the call, who are hungry for the living fire beyond religion's noise. Every action you take is more than just clicking a button. It's a code, a whisper to the unseen, declaring, "Send this light to those who are seeking it. Let those who are asleep awaken." Now breathe deeply. The next part doesn't just give you more information. It opens the door to taking action. Look at Jesus' life in a new way. Really see what's happening. His entire life was prayer in action. When he touched the leper, that was prayer. When he forgave the adulteress, that was prayer. When he fed the hungry, blessed the children, washed the disciples' feet, that was prayer. Not the prayer of words, not the prayer of religious ritual, but the prayer of embodiment, the prayer of being so aligned with divine love that every action becomes worship, every breath becomes communion, every moment becomes sacred. The ultimate flip that religion fears the most. Prayer isn't something you say. Prayer isn't something you do. Prayer is something you become. I and the Father are one. This wasn't just theology. This wasn't just something for seminary students to argue about. This was the secret of living prayer revealed. Complete alignment, Total unity, no separation between what you want and what God wants. No gap between earth and heaven, no distance between the one who's searching and what they're searching for. And here's why it has scared the religious leaders then, and why it still scares them now. If you become the prayer, if you live out divine love, if you walk in complete alignment with the Father's will, you don't need their buildings. You don't need them to stand between you and God. You don't need their permission to connect with God. You are the way to connect. Let's try this together right now. Breathe with me. Not just the words, but the reality behind them. Silently, in the depths of your being, breathe this truth. I and the Father are one. Don't just think it, feel it. Let it resonate within you. Again, even deeper now. I and the Father are one. One more time. Let it become your heartbeat. I and the Father are one. Don't try to analyze what just happened. Don't let your mind pick it apart. Just feel the connection. Feel the recognition. Something inside you remembers this truth. If you're still watching, if something inside you is waking up to this memory, it's not an accident. You were never meant for the shallow prayers of repeating things and asking for things. You were made for something far more amazing. You were meant to live out the prayer itself, to become the answer to every longing, the healing for every wound, the love that the world is desperately craving. But most people will never understand this. They're still looking outside themselves, still reaching up to the sky, still begging at heaven's door like spiritual orphans who don't know they're already home. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason this truth was buried so deep that finding it feels like remembering a dream you'd forgotten. The secret has been kept for a reason, and it's not the reason they told you. External prayer, the kind that reaches up to a distant God, serves a purpose, but not the purpose they told you. It keeps you dependent. It keeps you coming back to their buildings week after week, giving money to their organizations, submitting to their authority. Think about it. If you truly understood that the kingdom of heaven is inside you, that the Holy of Holies is your own consciousness, that you are the temple of the living God, what would happen to the religious system? It would fall apart overnight. But inner prayer, living prayer, the prayer of embodiment that Jesus showed us, that makes you free. Completely, radically, dangerously free. Free from needing their approval, free from their guilt and shame tactics, free from their constant fundraising campaigns for bigger buildings to house a God who was never limited to buildings in the first place. They taught you to reach upward because they needed you to believe God was far away. They taught you to beg because they needed you to believe you weren't worthy. They taught you to repeat their formulas because they needed you to believe you couldn't connect with God directly. But Jesus showed us the opposite. Prayer isn't about reaching up to heaven. Prayer is about going down into the kingdom that has always been inside you. And here's the part that will make you feel a surge of recognition. You've always known this. Somewhere deep down, beyond all the religious programming, you've always felt that the real connection happens in the secret place, in the silence, in the depths of your own being where no human authority can reach. Every time organized religion felt empty to you, every time their prayers felt meaningless, every time you left a service feeling further from God than when you came in, that wasn't your fault. That was your spirit recognizing fake spirituality. If you've gotten this far in this lesson, if something inside you is resonating with these words, it's because you were never meant for spiritual mediocrity. You were never meant to be a passive observer watching others perform rituals for you. You were meant for direct experience, direct connection, direct embodiment of the divine nature that was always your birthright. But knowing this in your head isn't enough. There's one more step. The step that turns understanding into experience, knowledge into knowing, belief into being. Here's what they never taught you in Sunday school. Jesus didn't spend most of his time in prayer poses. He spent most of his time being the prayer. Every act of kindness was communion with the Father. Every moment of forgiveness was worship. Every healing touch was a direct transfer of divine love made real in the physical world. Jesus didn't just pray for the hungry. He fed them. And that feeding was the prayer. He didn't just pray for the sick, he healed them. And that healing was the prayer. He didn't just pray for the outcasts, he embraced them. And that embrace was the prayer. This is why they tried to kill him. Not because he claimed to be God. Many people had done that. But because he showed that God's nature was available to everyone, that every human being could become a living prayer, a walking miracle, an embodiment of heaven on earth. The mystics called it the prayer without ceasing that Paul wrote about. Not endless words, but a life so aligned with God's will that every breath becomes worship, every heartbeat becomes communion, every action becomes sacred service. We're going to try this together right now, not just as a mental exercise, but as a direct experience of who you really are. Close your eyes. If you're somewhere you can't do this, Save this and come back to it when you can give it your full attention. Feel your breath. Don't change it. Just notice it. This breath that's breathing you right now, this is the Holy Spirit. Literally, the same word Jesus used for spirit, ruach, means breath. You are being breathed by God every moment. Now put both hands on your heart. Feel that faithful rhythm. This heart that has beaten billions of times without you ever having to ask it to, without you ever having to earn it, without you ever having to be worthy of it. This is the Father's love for you, drumming steadily in your chest every moment of every day. Now, still with your eyes closed, imagine getting up and going through your day, but walking as this prayer. Every step powered by divine breath, every heartbeat echoing the Father's love, every word you speak carrying the resonance of heaven, every touch you give transmitting the healing presence of the living God. This isn't just imagination. This isn't just a metaphor. This is who you actually are beneath all the conditioning, all the religious programming, all the lies about how unworthy you are. You're the prayer the world has been waiting for. Open your eyes. Look around you. Everything you see, every person, every challenge, every broken place is waiting for a living prayer to touch it. And if you followed this lesson to this point, if something inside you has awakened to this truth, then you are that living prayer. The question isn't whether God will answer your prayers. The question is whether you'll answer God's prayer for the world, which is you, walking in full awareness of who you really are. If you've made it this far, you need to understand something crucial about what just happened to you. You weren't just taught about prayer. You were brought into a sacred rebellion that has been going on for 2,000 years. Every generation has had its hidden ones, the ones who remembered what religion tried to bury, the Gnostics who kept the inner teachings alive, the mystics who chose direct experience over doctrine, the contemplatives who found God in silence rather than in sermons. They were persecuted, burned as heretics, driven underground, their books banned, their names erased from history, all because they held the same truth you just experienced, that the kingdom of heaven is within, that you are the temple of the living God. That prayer is not a performance, but a way of living. You are now part of that lineage. Whether you realize it or not, something has shifted in your consciousness. You can never unknow what you now know. You can never go back to seeing prayer as begging a distant God for favors. If you've made it to this moment, it's because you're not like everyone else. You were chosen to carry the secret way, chosen to remember what the masses have forgotten, chosen to live out what religion has reduced to empty ritual. The world is entering a time of great awakening. The old systems are falling apart. People everywhere are walking away from religious institutions that no longer nourish their souls. They're hungry for real spirituality. They're craving a direct connection with God. And they're waiting for living prayers like you to show them the way, not through preaching or trying to convert them, but through being the embodiment of divine love, so that your very presence becomes a reminder of what's possible. So the question that remains is this: will you step into this calling? Will you walk as the prayer you were born to be? Will you join the sacred rebellion of those who choose direct communion over religious performance? Because if you're ready for that level of commitment, I have one final secret to share that will seal this initiation and launch you into your true destiny as a living prayer. What I'm about to share with you has been the secret of every mystic, every saint, every person who has ever lived in constant connection with God. There is a prayer that is not spoken with words. There is a communion that requires no religious formula. There is a way of being that transforms not just your relationship with God, but your understanding of who God actually is. It's the prayer of recognition, the moment you stop looking for God out there and recognize God in here, not as a belief, not as a concept, but as the living reality of your own deepest nature. Close your eyes one final time. Breathe deeply into the silence we've created together. Now, in the deepest part of your being, without saying any words, simply recognize the presence that has been watching this whole time, the awareness that has been aware of your thoughts, aware of your emotions, aware of your breathing, aware of your heartbeat. That awareness, pure, unchanging, always present, is not separate from God. It is God expressing himself as your unique perspective, your unrepeatable way of being conscious. You are not a separate being trying to connect with God. You are God's way of experiencing this moment, this life, this reality. You are the divine dreaming of being human, while never stopping being divine. Rest in that recognition, not as something you need to achieve, but as something you remember, something that was always true and will always be true. We have reached the end of this lesson, but the real journey doesn't end here. What has been awakened in you today must be carried, protected, and nurtured, or it will fade back into the noise of the world. That's why our private sanctuary exists, our private Facebook group. It's the hidden gathering place where those who have been scattered find each other again. Inside, the conversation never stops, the fire never goes out, and the remembrance deepens with every person who joins. You'll find a link in the description and in the pinned comment. Step through, because no one awakens alone. And for those who are ready to root these teachings even deeper, we have prepared sacred companions for the journey. These aren't just products in the usual sense. They're keys, guides, and soul maps designed to anchor this awakening in your daily life, so that the flame you feel now doesn't flicker, but grows stronger. Those who use them find that the path opens faster, the codes unlock with greater clarity, and the kingdom within becomes not just an idea, but a living experience. The path is calling. The kingdom is within. Step through the doorway and don't walk alone. Until we meet again, remember the flame is inside you, and it must be carried forward.